effective optimizing cloud, resilient IT, and effective FinOps. And I'm going to start with you, Robert, because we were talking beforehand about optimizing cloud. And you said, I've been on a cloud journey for 10 years. So I've been on a cloud journey for 10 years. What have you learned about optimizing cloud over 10 years?
It's hard work. So I work at Coles. As I said, we've been on the journey for a while. We started with AWS. We moved off AWS, unfortunately, because of Amazon coming to Australia. Then we moved into Azure, and now we're sort of tapping into Google. So from a cloud optimization point of view, efficiencies, look, it's all about, for us, it's paving the way for the application teams to consume services quickly. So for us, it was all around optimizing automation, efficiencies, self-service. But with that come the wild, wild west. So we provided the capabilities, but with that came a big drive for teams to then go out and deploy all their services. But the cost became a problem, which it is at the moment, and we're trying to sort of manage that with FinOps, introducing FinOps as a capability across the organisation to help sort of control some of the costs. So that's kind of
you told me, though, Robert, that you want to take 20% out of your cloud spend.
Yes.
So the next year or so.
Yeah. So at the moment we've actually annualised cost savings of about sort of $1.5 million over this year to date. So we've sort of really started to juice more from an optimization point of view, getting out there, right-sizing, reserved instances, et cetera. So we're actually trying to get to 20% savings over the next sort of 12 months. So that's a bit of a target for us to reduce our OPEX and some CAPEX in cloud.
Okay. Now, Lisa, we're in a room of technologists, and you said the word that you're scared about using is culture. To actually effectively optimize cloud, you need to have a culture that recognizes it needs to do that. So could you tell us a bit about what you've done to change the culture to do that?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Culture for us is what the old saying it is. It eats strategy for breakfast. It really does. My team and I, over the last 4 years, have transformed some pretty serious state digital assets, which are actually your core and common platforms. The gentleman who asked from Treasury, the question from Treasury, thank you, sir. I agree completely. There's no way we're capitalising that stuff. It's not going to happen, but operationalising it. But culture for us took a miserable bunch of IT people who felt very isolated and separated from the business and made them the superstars. It actually took them from the edge where they were feeling alone, unable to share their value and their evidence of things going wrong. And so what we did was we actually said, all right, to do this, we're going to do it with you. And that means I'm not hiring a consultant. I'm taking my team on a growth path, and we're all getting educated together.
But you're also talking to me, Lisa, that you can't do it alone.
No.
Your team members have to buy into the need to optimize. It becomes part of their behaviors. It's not an instruction to do, it's a way of working.
Well, the first thing is they're not going to believe you if they don't trust you. So the first thing is they've got to really understand that you know where you want to go. 2 words, vision and purpose. Sounds weird to be at a technology conference talking about vision and purpose. But my vision that I have to work to, and I'm very proud of, is to be a trusted partner of agencies of the New South Wales government, to let them do their work well, to remove the duplication, that sort of thing. The purpose of our business is to enable it. So when you talk to your staff, you really need to give them the respect to say, help me, show me what you believe we could be doing better, and really work with them. Not as individuals, but in a collaborative team. What I know of IT people is you take one individual, you put them on their own, you ask them to solve something, most likely they will, but then they can't convince everybody else, and that's my job.
Okay, can I bring in Richard? Richard, you were talking to me about you got to look at cloud optimization as not just a financial thing. This is how you where you don't waste support resources, you make the best, optimize the use of the time, the people in your environment, and you've also got to look at how you develop applications as well, so they're most effective. Could you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Peter. We're in a chat earlier today where we were talking about moving applications into cloud and a migration journey. And part of the conversation, I think, is to get the best out of cloud, you need to be, you might right size once you're in cloud, you might right size on-prem, but you really need to be looking at right cloud. Should I be on-prem? Should I be in public cloud? Should I be colo? Should I be SaaS? So I think there's a conversation that we need to have internally with our application owners, the business owners for those applications, on what is the best way to deploy those so that we're deploying in the most optimal way, which might be cost optimization in public cloud. It might be infrastructure optimization, CPU optimization on-prem, or it might just be push it out to SaaS or even Bureau, outsource it totally.
Robert, you were talking to me about, Robert, that it's not just lift and shift in cloud. You've got to modernize. You've got to use it as a chance to modernize an application. You consciously avoided lift and shift. Could you tell us what, and you've developed this Cloud Center of Excellence in that regard. Could you share a bit about the Cloud Center of Excellence and what it does?
So about 5 years ago, we built the cloud strategy for Coles, and that was a cloud right, similar thing. Not a cloud first, it was a cloud right. So if a workload was ready, it would move. But as part of that strategy, we looked at the operating model, the culture, and we created part of that was about the Cloud Center of Excellence. And that was a team that exists today, was established back 4 years ago, and was about bringing, back then it was about bringing infrastructure folk from an operational point of view, software engineering folk together, and forming the Cloud Center of Excellence to build out our developer platforms, as we call it today, to support application teams doing self-serve through pull requests. So not getting in the way. And that's how we sort of achieved that. But yeah, the architecture really drove, from a project perspective, what was going on to cloud.
And you're talking there about that establishes the guardrails, getting to Richard's point about optimizing how the application is deployed to make it optimize it. You actually establish the guardrails so you're confident through this platform you're providing in the Center of Excellence that people are going to be following the right rules.
Yeah, so as I said, we built through self-serve. We used infrastructure as code. We used Terraform. We created pull requests, but we took care of all the infrastructure configuration from a networking, identity perspective, some of the security controls, and all the DevOps tooling. So we created that, what we call a bit of a plate, right? So, and then application teams would fill up that plate with whatever they wanted, but they did that. We gave them the freedom, but then we started to introduce modules which were allowed to, get a security endorsed, architecture endorsed module for services that are commonly used across cloud, and we'd provide our developers the ability to use those modules, but we didn't force them, so they didn't all use it, which then creates the problem that we've got a bit of a Wild Wild West happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that brings me to a point that you were talking to me about, Richard, which was accountabilities. And I've just done a research project for ADAPT on project management and project prioritization. And the hardest bit seems to be assigning accountabilities to people so people know what's expected of them. Could you outline why this is a challenge in optimizing for you?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think when it comes to accountabilities, there's different reasons that a service, and not infrastructure, not cloud, but a business service is created and built within an organization. For our organization, we call the owner of that the system business owner. And really that person is accountable for defining what the need is and why the IT organization would even build a technology in the first place. And I think that's where the accountability needs to sit. We've talked in the past around business-led IT funding. And I think when we have a cloud conversation, especially where we're in an OpEx world with variable costs in one of the hyperscalers, I think we need to put some of the accountability back into the business for carrying some of that cost, distributing the budget, if you like, out to other parts of the business. We have a centralized budget today, but certainly the utopia is to get to a distributed budget model.
Okay. And Lisa, just also getting back to the point that Robert was talking about, having an architecture blueprint that people are following, could you talk to us how you got buy-in from people to follow that and how that's helping you optimize your use of cloud?
It speaks to what you were saying, Richard. It's actually about sharing the value that those people are going to get. And I think what we've done, probably because technologists are technologists, we haven't shared the value. What we've done is we focused on that value. So really, instead of talking about what tool you're going to buy and how much you need to do it, it's more along the lines of, well, what value do we want across the business? And if you've got a business person and an IT person there, what you're going to find is you'll start to see that value materialise, and then let the team go off and design it. So really giving the team the freedom, once they've heard that business need, to really craft what the response is going to be, and backing them on it, but challenging them at the same time. So it's like saying you are the fighter pilot of your own jet, and you're going to actually help us design the battle we're going to go into. So you need to be able to think about it from the perspective of all the components and share it. Really share. If you can share across divisions of the business, what you're going to find out is really what your situation is and how you're going to go forward.
I want to talk about FinOps at the end as the final bit of our conversation, but I want to see how you've gone from optimizing to actually getting results from FinOps. But before that, the middle part of this is about resilient IT. And Lisa, it's a very hard question for someone from the New South Wales government, but you're going to get it from me, I'm afraid, because I was on a train to Sydney Airport last Thursday week, and the whole thing shut down,
Yes.
communications. So we all depend on IT performing. You know, if a private company's not working, the whole organisation stops. It's a bad look for a government 3 weeks out from an election that the whole thing does, and the confidence people have in IT is betrayed in some ways if things aren't resilient. So how do you get resilient without crying wolf that we need all the money under the sun to get ourselves up?
Again, you go back to the word of culture. It sounds weird that you're using a word like culture to fix resilience. But when you think about resilience, it's that ability to deliver consistently, not just resilient, but consistently. So it's an everyday business. Resilience doesn't happen once a month, it happens every day. It happens in your strategy, in your planning. It happens in the reflecting back into the work you've just delivered and really learning from it and going forward. Why I'm excited by FinOps, why I think, wow, aren't we lucky this thing exists and that we're all moving down it, is because we don't know the benefit of it yet. It's a really exciting time to start. I loved hearing the stories about how we're not sure it's 100%, but we're getting there. We don't know the benefits 100%. Of this yet. So it's really exciting time to drag it in kicking and screaming and really see where you can place it. Have a bit of fun with it. I mean,
no, I'm running this, so FinOps is coming at the end, so don't push me because I'm still talking about resilient IT.
Yeah, well, resilience.
And I've got everything in a major hyperscaler.
Yep.
All my systems, all my things. No, I've got BCP by default, haven't I?
I don't know, Peter. You'd have to have a look and have a chat to your team. Again, I would think that strategy would be fairly, in my world, I would feel not resilient if I had a single partner.
Yeah.
For me, I look to a diverse set of partners always, because I'm government. You might have noticed in the last few years we've had a little thing called COVID happen, and the New South Wales state government was very resilient. We actually were able to provide services where we weren't sure we were at first, and to see that happen and the people to really embrace it has created a new culture within government that I'm now using to drive resilience.
Okay, now before I go to Robert and Richard, I want you to tell this audience why your IT team is like Mariah Carey.
My IT team are like Mariah Carey because they really can perform, right? They can turn up any day and they can have really a moment where they can do whatever they want, as in they are the artist. I am the performance management team around Mariah Carey, so it's my job to make sure that she's ready for the stage. So to back my guys, I have to have the funding sorted. I have to have all the stakeholder relationships organised. I've got to make sure my communication's done correctly. I've got to make sure all my colleagues, my directors are on board, because unlike the old world where I was the boss, I'm part of a team. I'm not a boss on my own. So to make my guys the stars, Mariah Carey, and I think I may have taken this analogy slightly different to when we first discussed it, but the point here is she is the star. They are the stars of it, not me. It's my job to support them to get to where they want to go. And with FinOps, it's like saying, let's go and have a game of golf, and yet I turn up with my tennis gear. And why? Because really the environment isn't how they need to have it for their job. So my job is to make sure their environment is ready for them to just go for it and be who the best they can be. And they surprise me every day. They're an incredible bunch of people. About 120 of them.
There's lots of great people in IT.
There
Lots of
are,
great-
amazing.
Robert, one thing you talked to me about resiliency was the idea of observability. And I'm thinking of a business as complex as Coles with so many different business units. There's 24/7. Is the aspiration of having some sort of flight center control of what's going on in Coles, is that a pipe dream or is that where you're moving towards?
That's where some people in the organisation have this pipe dream, but I'm currently not really buying it because there's the complexity of Coles, the fact that you got on-prem, cloud, this, single pane of glass type view. It's hard to attain, especially when you've got SaaS services, you've got multi-cloud, we've got between Azure and Google, and then again, we've got services that are running overseas from a SaaS perspective. So to me, that's about where we're sort of de-risking resiliency, is about spreading your risk from an
So where does observability come in if you don't have a single pane of glass?
So for Coles, it's when a problem happens, it's about bringing everyone together, which we've got from a service delivery point of view, because someone can join the dots. And when we have problems that we do all the time, we bring the right people together, and then we're able to connect that some of the visual aspects and the teams together to solve a problem. But right now, we're still trying to solve that problem or the challenge about connecting from app all the way through to infrastructure, so that a team can see it and understand it, which between cloud and on-prem, that's pretty hard to do.
Okay. Richard, you were talking about resiliency in terms of you've got to take a risk management approach to determine where your exposure is and how you counter that. So can you tell us where your thinking is there?
Yeah, look, I think for myself and I think for the team that I lead at TPG, resiliency is about being able to manage risk. Sometimes we can mitigate it. Occasionally we get to avoid it, not very often. Most of the time it's how we react to a scenario, and that's, I think, where observability helps, is the ability to detect. But I think certainly for myself, it's how we manage the risk around the different scenarios that may present. They might be security, they might be financial, they might be operational. Any one of those or others can cause a breakdown in systems. Failures happen. And I think we need to, in terms of the applications and how we deploy, design and build for failure, because things will break, and that's one of the mitigations we can deploy. But certainly, risk management and how we address the risk is key for me.
Okay, because one thing I explored with you before is one of the biggest dangers in risk mitigation is how we respond to failures by adding more complexity and more controls in the organization, which makes fault resolution even harder. Can you tell me what your thinking is there? Because you had a very powerful lesson about, I think it was design for simplicity and plan for expect for failure, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Designing your applications in the simplest way possible. Expect that you're going to have failures, but build the application so that you can sustain a failure. Now that might mean you're building it across multiple sites or multiple clouds or whatever it might look like. What I've found, and I think what we were talking about in the past, Peter, was often the way we react to a failure is we add on a process, and then we have another failure and we kind of build on another one, and then we put on another operational process and a governance process and a financial gate. And we end up creating a really complex series of gates and approvals and all sorts of things just to do anything. I think if we're able to design and build for failure in a simple way at the outset, we avoid some of that challenge that we build up over time.
Okay. Robert, part of your advice to me was you thought you spread your risk through the use of cloud. And can you explain a bit more about that thinking for you?
Yeah, so this is where the strategy for Coles, the cloud right strategy, is around SaaS before PaaS before IaaS. So a lot of our applications, business critical applications, some of them moved into SaaS. So they could be residing in AWS, even though we don't like AWS. They could be in Google, they could be overseas, they could be in private data centers. So by de-risking and spreading your offering from a cloud perspective, you're de-risking some of your business. So if you have an outage if there's an outage in AWS that's running a service, then all your business isn't impacted. So even our stores are designed. Every single store is designed to be able to operate offline. So now we're talking edge. We're talking connecting up our stores to cloud. That same model needs to exist from a resilience point of view. If you connect up to cloud, it has to operate offline because we're here to service our customers.
But I'm curious about how you implement something like that, given that you're 24/7 in many ways, even if your store isn't open, you've got people behind the store of replenishing stock and warehousing and all that sort of stuff. How do you evolve a strategy in a store like that to get that resiliency?
It's about keeping that from a store point of view. It's keeping that model from our distribution centres. It's multiple distribution centres. So the technology from resiliency, whether it's cloud or from our distribution centres, which have physical tin in those distribution centres, is having that resilient hardware in place as well. So multiple services and resilient hardware. So HA, etc., as part of that.
Gotcha. We're going to come to FinOps, but I'm going to hold you back. No, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to start with your FinOps.
Okay.
So I spoke to you beforehand and said, 12 months ago, if you spoke to me and said FinOps, I would say, I've got no idea what that is, And now every magazine, every conference, everything, I'm doing lectures, I'm doing round tables. Everyone's talking about FinOps. Is it the latest buzzword, or is there something more substantive to it in your mind, Lisa?
I think there's something to it. I think it's about the world being a place that things are joined up. And in operations today, sure, FinOps is part of it. Because really, if you think about it, we own products and services that literally have licensing happening 24/7 hours a day, right? No one's going to keep hold of that. FinOps also is about talking to the finance committee and teams and bringing them in. I've heard that a number of times today and really glad I heard it because we do that. I put the director of corporate finance on my boards for my technical deliverables, which is sometimes a bad move because he finds out everything going on as we go along. But what it does give you is he goes into bat for me when he understands what's happening. So FinOps from an automation perspective and a systems perspective is fabulous, but the FinOps of actually seriously collaborating up and downstream. So you really got your corporate guys knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it. They become your biggest advocates. They ask for more of it. Keep doing what you're doing.
But it's a reflection, you were talking to me about accepting continuous delivery.
Oh, absolutely.
That this isn't just,
this is part of it.
You've got to accept that the digital environment of today is constantly evolving and it needs constant investment within it.
Constant investment.
And it's not looking at the expenditure as a one-off business case. This is a commitment to an ongoing investment.
Absolutely. I mean, unlike anyone who isn't in government in this place, we have Treasury. Treasury is absolutely a beast unto itself with its thinking, and you must fit into it. Hence the point about capitalisation. Never going to happen in New South Wales government at the moment. If they don't understand what you're doing, and what you're doing with FinOps is you're actually saying, I'm baking in the controls for you, boss. I'm putting that guardrail in the hands of my developers when they need it, so that they are actually able to remain within the framework instead of outside. So really what you're saying is instead of having a lot of rogue players doing what they like, developing things willy-nilly, you're saying to your finance people, I've worked out a way to actually keep them within their scope and keep them within their budget. And I love a diversified budget. I think everyone should have access to their own budget. Why not? Then you can manage it just like your own purse. You know what you've got to spend. I think if a developer's given a beautiful tool like the cloud to play with and no rules, it's like a baby with a chainsaw. See you later,
I
right?
thought it was a trip to the amusement park, you said.
Well, I know, I've gone baby with a chainsaw because really they can do anything and you'll be the one with the fingers cut off.
Okay. Now, Richard, you've got someone in your team with specific responsibility for FinOps. Could you tell me how you hired that person or how you won the business case to have that person on board?
Well, Jason's here in the room today. Thanks for joining us, Chase. In fact, we had somebody as part of a cloud practice that was driving, I guess, an early version of a FinOps practice for us. He decided to move on to pursue his own business in partnership with someone who I think is next door today. And so we had a role that came up. When we looked at, and when a role opens up in your organisation, you do look at what is the best way for me to deploy or redeploy that role, and sometimes it's to refill for the same function, and other times it might be to position it somewhere else. Given where we were as an organisation, bringing somebody in to really look at the financial operations of our cloud practice, and we saw earlier today there was a slide that had, I remember various sort of stages, and right at the end was quite a lot of technical elements, yeah? And that's what we were focused on, was the technical. We were already embedding with our cloud architecture team, working with the applications on how to drive some efficiency and to right-size before deployment. But what we needed to do was start to react and help measure how we were tracking so that we could build budget forecasts for next year, the year after, and the one after that. So certainly looking at what was the right fit for the organisation, and a FinOps role was absolutely best fit.
And your interpretation of FinOps was a very broad perspective. It wasn't cost management, it was collaboration with teams, resources, that sort of stuff, use of vendors, reserved instances. Could you give us some sort of, shed some light on how you define FinOps within TPG?
Yeah, so as I said, part of it is some of the technical and the reacting to what you've got and trying to right-size a deployment in public cloud. But I think there's going through contractual negotiations with your vendors. There's working with your internal business stakeholders, the system business owners I talked about earlier, who should have accountability for cost, and helping educate them in the best use of cloud and the best optimizations for the use of cloud.
Okay. Robert, if I can bring you in, and we're going to be talking about crawling and jogging very soon, where you want to be. But you told me you've been on the FinOps journey for some time. How does Coles define FinOps?
Well, I thought we were doing pretty well until the previous presenter, Manav, presented his presentation and where they're at. So I'm kind of looking at Simon because I know he's had a part to play in that from an Aptio perspective. But look, we were doing one thing as part of the cloud journey. We had cost management in there and managing our costs, so we can attribute every single cost in cloud to a business unit, and that was through our tagging. So we've had that from day one. So the Inform has been there, which is I guess the crawling or whatever it is. But so now we're talking about sort of starting to optimize and reduce some of the costs, and that's where only recently the FinOps and the concept of FinOps has landed in my space. It was with finance from a Coles point of view, but they weren't really moving, so it's come back into cloud engineering, and now we're sort of starting to bring that capability. But for me, it's about, as I've talked about before, it's not just one person, it's everyone.
Yeah.
Right? And it's about bringing the SMEs in who know compute, for example, and trying to reduce the compute costs. It's bringing in our consumers, it's bringing in more finance, and in particular, more importantly, it's bringing in the executive leadership to drive that accountability across the teams.
Okay. I want to talk to you, Lisa, in terms of what you were saying is you think this collaboration between finance and IT is actually fostering a really good marriage, a powerful marriage with both understanding the role the other plays in the organisation, whereas sometimes in the past there may have been adversarial between them. Could you tell us your thinking about this?
For sure. I don't do anything without my digital operations team, nothing. I used to do a lot without them, but I don't do anything without them now. They are essential. They're as essential as your own team, aren't they, really? Because they're going to do all of the deep accounting that needs to be done, backed up by the deep thinking around the technology. And once I've seen it happen when people get into the room, and at first they're like this, because your InfoSec and your finance team and everyone's sort of looking at each other going, what the heck? It takes a while to make people feel open and share. But once they seem to get into it, they very quickly start going, right, well, that's a point where we're going to win on, and explaining why, and then, okay, great, I'll track that over here. Great, I'll report it over here. Bring them together today. There's no reason not to. Right? And because it's going to enrich the guys in the finance team, they suddenly feel like, boy, I understand what we do. The tech team feel very, a bit of confidence. Oh, the finance team are helping me. And really and truly in government, that's how it's done today. Finance team and tech team really close. Sometimes it's a bit tough because, the finance guys will want to go, no, you just can't do that. So when we turn around and say to them, great, well, that data isn't going to be safe then, good luck to you. You know what I mean? You've got that conversation occurring as opposed to failure just popping out the end.
But you're the one talking to me about culture change.
Yes.
And these two people have been two very different beasts for a long time.
But they're the same sort of beasts.
Yeah.
I think finance people and tech people intrinsically are really the same sort of people.
Is that right?
Well, I think so.
My wife's an accountant, by the way.
Well, she probably thinks she's superior to you in what you do, so you know what I
right.
mean? She's an accountant, exactly. What I see of accounting types with technical types is a marriage made in heaven. There's a strong logic path that both sides want. And what's really great about it is when it comes together, it's more powerful than anything else you've got because it's the money and the plan. Then you can wrap all the business people around it. They're generally happy as anything because they're suddenly getting outcomes they never thought they could have.
Okay. Now, Richard, I know it's contentious, so you know how far you want to go on this question. But we're in a situation now, inflation's escalating. The Australian dollar is plummeting. A lot of people pay for cloud services with the hyperscalers in US dollars. So you've got very high variable costs, very difficult to tell your organization what your expense is and stuff like that. You have a feeling that the subscription model that a lot of cloud is based on has an end-by date. Can you give us your thinking there?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure it's a use-by date on subscription, and it's not unique to public cloud. It goes for software licensing and a number of other services as well. I guess my theory behind it is we're in a world economic environment where the world market is shifting. It's been low interest rates and so forth for a long time. In the residential space, that means we can all afford to pay the bills. But for an organisation, it means gaining access to money for leverage is harder. And when we leverage an organisation, we can increase the return, or at least that's the economic theory behind it. I think what we're going to see over the next few years is I think our finance organisations are going to take quite a risk-averse position.
I agree with that.
And variable costs, and that will be cloud licensing, subscription licensing, etc., I think are going to become harder. And I think the finance teams, I'm starting to see it in our organisation, are going to favour a fixed cost scenario with capital investment so that they've got a known quantity that they're looking at least for the next few years, I think.
I'm going to go to you, Robert, about you saying it's not just one person's responsibility, it's everybody's job, and I think Lisa and Richard are talking along the same lines. But you're saying in a FinOps model, you're bringing together the engineering team, the finance team, the IT team. How do you get them together in a room? What's the agenda that you start on, and how do you get them to have skin in the game on this?
So the driver for us was our John Cox, our CTO, communicating to all of technology that we had to reduce costs. So we have some from an OpEx challenge point of view. So it was like, we've got to reduce costs. You've got to go start looking at all your budgets and all your cloud spend and where we can save money. So that was a catalyst for us then, being able to work with the teams So we started to have teams coming to us. So various teams were working with us. We identified based on what we know from a spend point of view, the big consumers, in particular our data team. So we were able to target specific groups or specific departments and have meaningful conversations about where they could reduce costs. So we leveraged our tooling, from native tooling, from our vendor tools to look at where we could save costs. And we've targeted those teams to do that. And so far it's working.
Can you tell us about how you use reserved instances to keep a better handle on costs?
Yeah, so look, we hadn't done a great deal until recently, but we've got a lot of infrastructure, compute out there that's always been used, in particular from a data point of view, from some of our SAP systems point of view. So we're able to lock in some costs for some were 1 year, some were 2 year, and some were 3 year, and we reduced our cost as a result of enabling reserved instances. Because those services are part of the business, they're running, they're going to be there for a while. So that's how we locked that in.
Okay, because I'm going to give you the final word. You had the opening word, and I said you've been in the cloud journey for 10 years, and yet you tell me you're still crawling. You know, why are you still crawling after you have so much experience?
Well, we started, it's because only in the last 5 years everyone else has jumped onto cloud. So 10 years ago when we tried to drive cloud, it was very much an IaaS approach. We build it and they'll come. They never really came. So it was learnings from back then that we knew we had the model wrong. And then we shifted our approach. We built a new cloud strategy and we went forward with that. So that's kind of, it's been a journey. So.
And you told me at the end of the journey is when you start jogging. So when you're jogging with cloud, what does jogging enable you to do?
I said jogging from a FinOps perspective.
You did say FinOps, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, so again, it was more optimization, more engagement and accountability with the teams, and that's the key.
Yep.
When we're there, we're really starting to jog, and we're maybe hopping at the moment.
Richard, where do you see FinOps will be going in TPG?
Where I'd like it to go?
Yeah.
A distributed budget. My business capability owners are funding their services. So right now we're doing some optimization and we're doing some showback, but we're only doing some showback in our public cloud environment. I need to stretch that across everything we've got on-prem as well, which is probably 80% of the workload. And I'd like to get to a point where the business is funding their consumption. Because frankly, the only lever I've seen in 15 years since the emergence of virtualization to contain some of the sprawl is to put the financial lever back into the hand of the owner of the service.
And Lisa, the final word, where would you like FinOps to go?
I want it to be the buzzword we talked about 5 years ago. I just want it to happen and then we won't talk about it anymore. And I think when we get to that point, there'll be the next thing, right? But really, the world's going to be an interesting place. We get the money sorted, the architecture, the strategies all playing out well. It's going to be a really resilient Australia. It's awesome. I think it's a good place.
Well, that certainly ADAPT's mission to create a future-proof Australia. So can we please thank Lisa, Robert and Richard for their time. Thank you.
Thank you.